50% of all cancers are preventable, and one of the best ways that you can reduce your risk of getting cancer is by changing the foods that you eat every day. There are 4 major classes of foods that directly feed cancer cells, and in this video I'm going to show you which of those 4 classes of foods to avoid, and the simple nutritional framework that I give my own patients to starve cancer cells, improve immunity, and reduce inflammation. Now, our modern-day food has one huge problem, and that directly impacts how cancer grows. For a cancer cell to survive, grow, and spread, it needs 4 things: fuel, usually in the form of glucose, chronic inflammation, certain growth signals like insulin and IGF-1, and a blood supply also known as angiogenesis. Many staples of the modern diet support each stage of this cancer growth process. Now, most people worry about sugar, red meat, or pesticides. But one of the most harmful categories of foods directly feeding cancer cells is hiding in foods that people think are healthy. This class of foods are ultra-processed emulsifiers. Now, these emulsifiers are added to foods to make them creamier, and you'll literally find them everywhere. They're in things like protein bars, dairy-free milks, ice creams, coffee creamers, gluten-free products, bottled salad dressings, and even some yogurts and high-protein snacks. So, here's why this matters. There are 2 specific emulsifiers, polyorbate 80 and carboxymethyl cellulose, or CMC, that have repeatedly shown to trigger inflammation, disrupt the gut barrier, and increase tumor formation in animal models. Now, this is where things get interesting. Your gut lining is supposed to be tight, protected, selective, and sealed. These emulsifiers dissolve mucus, which is the thin protective layer in the gut, and allow bacteria and other byproducts to get too close to immune cells. This ultimately leads to chronic low-grade inflammation, metabolic changes, and gut microbiome shifts. All of these things together create an environment that cancer loves. In other words, emulsifiers don't cause cancer directly, but they create the conditions cancer cells thrive in by causing chronic inflammation. If cancer is a spark that causes the fire, emulsifiers help dry out the forest. So, some tips on how you can reduce your emulsifier exposure. The first thing is to read food labels and be on the lookout for these specific names. Check for polyorbate 80, polyorbate 60, carboxymethyl cellulose, cellulose gum, carrageenan, as well as mono and diglycerides. If you see any of these, it's time to put that food item back on the shelf. Number 2 is choose simple alternatives such as oat milk or almond milk that have only 3 to 5 ingredients total. Do heavy cream or half and half instead of artificial creamers. Create your own homemade vinaigrette instead of bottled salad dressings, and choose protein bars with ingredients that you can actually pronounce. Tip number 3 is what I like to call the grandma rule. And I don't know about you, but if your grandma was a great cook, she probably knows quite a few ingredients. So, if your grandma wouldn't recognize the ingredient on the back of a food label, your gut probably won't recognize it either. Honestly, this one rule alone dramatically lowers inflammation. And inflammation is the main engine that cancer cells use to grow. Now, the problem with our modern food system is that foods can be contaminated long before they ever reach your plate. And one of the most powerful natural carcinogens we've ever discovered comes from something that most people don't even think about. And this is a specific mold toxin called aflatoxins. Aflatoxins form when certain crops are stored in warm, humid conditions, especially when moisture isn't properly controlled. These aflatoxins tend to show up in peanuts, pistachios, almonds, walnuts, corn, and grains. Not because these foods are bad, but because they're vulnerable to mold growth during the storage and the transportation process. Now, here's where a lot of people get misled. Nuts themselves do not cause cancer. I want to repeat that because it is important. Nuts themselves do not cause cancer. It's contaminated nuts that are the problem. The nut contamination becomes more likely when you're dealing with imported nut mixes, nuts bought in bulk, nut butters like almond butter from lower quality suppliers, and grains stored without proper temperature control. Aflatoxins are bad because they damage your DNA directly and they overwhelm your liver's detox pathway, which is why long-term exposure increases your risk for liver cancer in particular. But the key here is exposure, not complete avoidance. This isn't about cutting out nuts entirely. It's about choosing the right nuts that are fresh, clean, and properly stored. You really want to buy your nuts from reputable companies that source their nuts from dry climates. You can also keep your nuts in the fridge or the freezer. And you really want to try to use them within about a month after first opening the bag. You can also roast your nuts if you prefer, but this doesn't reduce your aflatoxin exposure completely, although it will lessen it a bit. One of the biggest problems with our modern diet is how carbohydrate-heavy it really is. And the problem with a lot of carbs, especially all at once, is they are directly turned into sugar. And this matters because cancer cells don't just like sugar, they depend on it, and this isn't just table sugar. This is glucose that your body creates from everyday foods like breads, pastas, cereals, pastries, soda, and sweetened drinks, fruit juices, and candy. This is tied to something called the Warburg Effect, where cancer cells burn sugar rapidly even when oxygen is available. Glucose essentially becomes cancer cells' default fuel. Think of it this way. Most of the cells in our body create energy like stacking Legos. Cells receive signals from the body, and they stack the Legos neatly in order. And once the Lego design is finished, the cells stop stacking the Legos. Cancer cells create energy like Legos too, but they stack them in various orders, creating something chaotic and completely different from what it's supposed to be. That stacking out of order only happens when the cancer cells get sugar. And here's where things get even more concerning. Sugar doesn't just fuel cancer cells. It increases the hormones or the signals that tell those cells to keep growing. These hormones, like insulin and IGF, act like growth accelerators. Back to our Lego analogy, the sugar causes the cancer cells to stack the Legos out of order. And then sugar increases insulin and IGF-1, which tells the cells to keep stacking the Legos out of order over and over again. This creates a massive tower of Legos that the body can't get rid of. And congratulations, now you have a tumour. Some cancer cells, especially breast cancer cells, have been known to have 6 times the amount of insulin receptors rather than regular cells in the body. The cancer is literally programmed to run on this system. This means that a high sugar diet sends stronger growth signals directly to cancer cells rather than healthy cells. But the good news is that you don't have to completely eliminate carbohydrates. It's all about choosing the right carbohydrates that don't fuel these cancer cells. You want to switch out the high-glycemic carbs for low-glycemic ones. This means changing out white bread for whole grain or sprouted bread. Instead of pasta, switch it out with chickpeas, lentils, or quinoa. For sugary cereals, use oats and berries. And instead of pastries, use Greek yogurt and berries. In general, you want to try to reduce added sugars wherever possible. This means limiting pastries, cookies, pop, and other sugary drinks like sweet tea and energy drinks. You want to choose whole food carbohydrates that have fibre and are therefore digested a bit slower. Think things like berries, beans and quinoa. For all you pop lovers out there, and yes, I say pop because I'm from the Midwest, switch to unsweetened tea, sparkling water, or even diet soda when needed. The bottom line is this: you don't have to give up all of your carbohydrates. You just have to choose the ones that fuel you, not the cancer cells. One of the biggest misconceptions that I see all the time is that moderate drinking is considered safe. But from a cancer standpoint, alcohol has been classified as a Group 1 carcinogen. This is the same category as tobacco and asbestosis. Now, this doesn't mean that alcohol is equivalent to smoking, but it does mean that there is a clear established link between alcohol intake and cancer. Even small amounts of alcohol increase the risk for colon cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, and esophageal cancer. The main reason for this is because when alcohol is metabolized by the body, it turns into acetaldehyde, and this is a chemical that directly damages DNA, leading to inflammation. Alcohol also interferes with DNA repair, depletes key nutrients like B vitamins, disrupts hormone balance, and acts like a solvent, making other carcinogens more harmful to your tissues. In other words, alcohol doesn't just cause damage, it makes your body more vulnerable to other sources of damage as well. And yes, even just one drink a day has been shown to increase the risk of certain cancers, particularly breast cancer. But this isn't about perfection, guilt, or never drinking again. It's about understanding this truth. When it comes to cancer, drinking less is better than drinking more. A simple shift like cutting back from 8 drinks a week to even 4 drinks a week makes a huge difference in your overall cancer risk. Now, if you can't remember everything that we talked about in this video today, that's totally fine. I put together all the important points and everything that you need to know in my anti-cancer food guide, and you can grab a copy of that guide completely for free using the link in the description. The wise heart will acquire knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks it out. This is from the book of Proverbs 18:15. Now, if this video opened your eyes to how common everyday foods can increase your risk of getting cancer, you might want to check out common medications that are quietly increasing your risk of getting dementia. And I highly recommend checking that video out right